so good to be back with you all this morning, and I know that Reverend Keith Watson continued a discussion of revival while I was away, bringing you some new insights about the Holy Spirit and how we get to that point of revival that we're striving for in this Lenten season. Easter is just around the corner now, and there's only one more week until Jesus rides triumphantly into Jerusalem on a donkey's back, and a few short days after that until he is arrested, tortured, and crucified. But we are not quite to the cross yet. We're still working our way there. And as the Gospel of Matthew reminds us, there's no need to worry about tomorrow, because each day has enough trouble and enough worry of its own. Each of us, in our own lives and in our own ways, has enough storms raging right now, or has storms which have raged within us and around us in the past. So today, as we move through the Lenten season and prepare to approach the cross, I invite us all to take a closer look at our own crises by looking through the lens of the life of the founder of United Methodism, John Wesley. And to be honest, to take a closer look at the complete mess that Wesley made out of his own life. I don't know if it will give you hope, but for me personally, it helps me on my journey to know that nobody is perfect. Some of you may remember where we left off a few weeks ago. John Wesley was born in northern England to an Anglican or Church of England priest of a father and a spiritual leader, mother of 9, named Susanna. As a toddler, John was plucked from the burning parsonage, not unlike the story that Marie shared with us this morning. On the second story, just before the building collapsed, a neighbor grabbed him on a ladder out of that burning building. And his mother, Susanna, was convinced John that God had saved his life so that he could accomplish great things in the world. Thanks, Mom. No pressure. Maybe expectations have something to do with how we experience life. John Wesley went away to school at age 7. He moved to London and entered Oxford University at age 17. He spent 15 years at Oxford, finishing his education, being ordained as an Anglican priest, just like his daddy, and teaching Greek. Now, some of you remember from a few weeks back that John's younger brother Charles also studied at Oxford, and Charles is actually the one who wrote over 3,000 hymns from which we still sing out of our hymn book today. And together these two brothers started a holiness club at Oxford. They got up early every morning to pray and read the Bible, and they got teased, earning them the nickname Methodist for their rigidity in pursuing spiritual disciplines and a holy life. And this week I want to pick up with just that rigidity, that near obsession that young John felt to try and win his salvation. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but John Wesley worked so hard in his life to earn God's love and to please the Lord with some great sacrifice, with some great accomplishment. His faith was largely in his head, and until it sank into his heart, it would cause some major storms and disappointments and failures in his life. Because no matter what John did, nothing seemed to be good enough. He fasted twice a day, he read the Bible and awoke early every morning for prayer. He took communion weekly, sometimes even daily. He visited the sick, the elderly, and the imprisoned. He taught classes, he led this student holiness club, and he even refused to cut his hair. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Wesley, but he has long, flowing black hair because he would rather save the money for the barber and give it to the poor. He was very extreme in his beliefs, and Reverend Adam Hamilton, who's a current United Methodist pastor in Kansas, wrote about Wesley in his 2014 book called Revival. He said, "There's a fine line between a passionate pursuit of holy living and an unhealthy legalism focused on rules and guilt. Have you ever tried harder and harder, doing more and more to earn God's love or to earn the love and respect of someone else? If so, then you can relate to Wesley. He felt compelled to do more, to prove his passion and his worthiness to God. So even though he had been deathly afraid of the water since his young childhood, he volunteered to take a 3-month sea voyage to the New World, to the new American colony of Georgia. Wesley wanted to convert the natives. That's what he wrote. But in his private journal, he also wrote that he hoped to save his own soul. And he talked his brother Charles and 2 of their friends into joining him, and off they sailed. It was 1735, and if any of you have read history from that period, you know that a trip from England to the U.S. was no Caribbean cruise liner. The seas were very deadly, and John was terrified most of the 3 months that they were at sea. And the climax came on one particular day, which was January 25th, 1736, and John journaled that the sails of the boat were in tatters, and that waves were washing overboard, and water was pouring below deck, and the English passengers were running about screaming for their lives. But over off to the corner of the deck, there was a small group of Germans, Moravians, who practiced a different kind of faith. And they stood in a circle, they held hands, and they were singing a psalm, very quietly, very calmly. And John recognized that there was something about their faith that he didn't have, something that he didn't understand, and he wanted to get it. Not only to get it intellectually, but to get it in his heart. And so even when he landed in the U.S., he maintained contact with the German Moravians, and they would become important in his story, and in fact in our story, the story of United Methodism. But John wasn't quite ready to give up his own control and his own search to make a name for himself yet. So as soon as the boat docked in Georgia, the first thing he did was dump all the rum overboard. Now, you know, everyone does what they think is right. John was a teetotaler. He didn't think alcohol, he thought alcohol was very dangerous. This rum had been sent for the people to celebrate their life-harrowing journey to America. And the first thing he did was pitch it overboard. And I can tell you that that's not always the best way to win friends and influence people. But, you know, we all make our journey. So some of the rum he dumped overboard belonged to some of the passengers who then became his parishioners in Savannah, Georgia. So he had a bit of a rocky start in his ministry in Savannah, and they were meeting weekly on Sunday mornings, but he didn't think that was enough. So John started daily sunrise services at 5 a.m. every morning. Now the people there were in their late teens, early 20s, people coming to the New World looking for their fortunes, and some of them did come to the services, but soon John decided that only those who attended the sunrise service were invited to take communion during the Sunday service. And then people started to get a little bit anxious about this new young preacher they had and his Pharisaic legalism. If you'll remember the Pharisees in the Bible, they're the ones who knew all of the right words and all of the right laws, but they didn't have much heart or much grace or much mercy in their practice. So John's legalism started to choke out his own reason, his own humanity, and even his own joy. He met a young woman named Sophia Hopke when he was 32, serving as a pastor in Savannah. She was 17 or 18 years old, which was about the age that you married back in those days. And her uncle and guardian thought John was a suitable match because of his long hair and his good looks and his passion for the Lord. But John began to lean towards celibacy, following in a Catholic tradition which was not part of the Anglican Church, going that one step further to prove to God that he was good enough. John offered Sophia spiritual guidance and friendship, and that was all. And she was happy to accept that offer, but secretly she also began to accept the romantic advances of another man named William Williamson. And when John learned that they were engaged and hastily married, his heart was broken. He was so angry, and he met with her in private and banned her from receiving communion in the church. But the next Sunday, she and her husband came forward for communion, and he publicly denied them in front of the entire church. This was not a very bright move. Preachers are humans, and we also make mistakes. So Sophia and her husband William filed charges in the court of law for defamation of character. And the court proceedings in the New World went on for months, for over 3 months. And all the while, the parishioners were getting quite tired of their legalistic, rigid, structured, and flawed leader. So one night, December 1737, in the cold and dark of night, without telling anyone, Wesley left Savannah. He fled to Charleston, South Carolina. He got on a boat and he headed back to England. John Wesley had gotten in over his head, and his heart had betrayed him. He didn't succeed in converting any native peoples, and he obviously didn't even save his own soul. He was a mess. He was a failure. He had disappointed himself and his entire family. But the message of hope in this story is that when we fail, and when we are at the end of our wisdom and our strength, at the end of our ropes, then there is a time when some of us choose to finally, honestly reach out and call on God and ask for help and receive the grace that was always there waiting for us. John's storms weren't just at sea. They were in his head and in his heart and in his soul. He had no peace. He was like this scripture from James, running about, unstable in everything that he did, without the grounding in the knowledge of God's grace and love. When he got back to England, he was ready to give up his entire life's work. All of the spiritual disciplines, all of the preaching that they had done, he was finished. And he visited a Moravian friend named Peter Bowler, who was going to be a missionary in America at that time. And he told Peter of his troubles. And Peter said, "John, preach faith till you have it. Fake it till you make it." I don't know if anybody ever said that to you, but it's some of the best advice that I've ever gotten. When I am hurting and I wish I could make the pain stop, but I can't, sometimes the best thing I can do is just fake it until I can make it. And if you're angry at God, and sometimes there are very good reasons to be angry at God, then you can cry it out or scream it out or pray it out until you are empty, because God listens. Don't waste your time wallowing in your failures or expressing your disappointment to others, because that just makes your wounds grow larger. You can keep feeling hurt. We're humans. We do hurt. But in your hurt, I invite you to open your spirit and humbly ask God to show you whatever it is that this storm could possibly teach you. Ask God to use your pain to transform you and thus transform everyone else around you. It worked for John Wesley. It worked for Jesus on his way to the cross, and it can work for us too, just as today's text from James assures us. Crises grow our endurance and our faith when we open our eyes to see God in all things, even and sometimes especially in our own darkness and disappointments. Hamilton wrote, "As Wesley learned, healing and grace and new beginnings come when we let go of the right to be angry." I had to read that a few times this week and pray about that a lot. Sometimes God's grace comes when we let go of the right to be angry. I know that that's easier said than done, but I think it might be about time for some of us to let go. You see, that was only 5 months after John Wesley left America in shame that he begrudgingly went to a religious society meeting in Aldersgate Street in London. He was broken and he was empty. He had nothing else to give. And as he sat among others seeking God's truth, he heard something that changed him forever. The speaker was explaining the change that God works in our hearts through our faith in Jesus Christ. And Wesley felt his heart strangely warmed. Those are his words, the words that he used to describe. Strangely warmed, a physical experience, a metaphysical reminder spoken from God straight into Wesley's heart. And I think it's a reminder from God that we all need today as well. "I have always loved you and accepted you. You have always been enough. You have sometimes tried to be too much. Just sit back, relax, and let me love you just as you are. I will calm your storms. I will heal your wounds. I may use you for great things someday, and I may not. Either way, there's nothing you can do to win, to earn, or to deserve my love. The grace of God's love is a gift freely given. It has always been there, waiting for you to reach out and grab hold of it, waiting for your faith to drop from your head into your heart. Now is the time of revival. Now you are ready. Be healed. Wake up. And let's get going. The end is drawing near." Amen.